Hello, this is Michael Tabb. We are in the fourth and final week of both writing for film and animation, as well as character creation and development classes. This is an open question Q&A with the professor, me, and we'll go over what the homework entails for everybody. But the first thing I like to do always is to give my attendees an opportunity to ask any questions they have for this week. They are both classes this week are writing actual scripted scenes. One class is writing their first character, their first protagonist introduction scene, and the other class is writing their first single story 3-act short film screenplay. And it can be animation or live action. So that's what we're working on this week. I'll start by asking, does anybody have any questions?
Actually, I was kind of wondering because the idea that I have for my protagonist introduction is going to be very much so action based. It's probably only going to have 2 or 3 lines of dialogue total.
That's okay.
And yeah, especially, I mean, everything is always show, don't tell. So I figured that it's got to be a good way to go.
Yeah.
My question is because what I'm thinking about right now is going to be a fight scene, and I'm just wondering what's the best way to, is I'm trying to go through the book and that screenwriter's Bible I'm trying to figure out, and I guess it's difficult for me to do it just through a textbook. What's the best way for me to write out a fight without choreographing every single move, and also without taking the cheap way out and saying, well, they
They
fought
fought.
for a bit.
Well, you'd never put it in past tense. You always put all action in a screenplay, whether it's a scene or a whole script. It's always in present active tense.
Right.
Two, you have two goals in the introduction scene of the protagonist. One is going to be to quickly establish the protagonist's character flaw
Mm-hmm.
and possibly their skill in how they deal with having had that flaw for this time and what they've become good at to compensate. It's important.
Which the fighting is the good part. The 2 lines of dialogue will illustrate my flaw.
Conflict resolution. his conflict resolution methods could use a little subtlety.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at the end, he's getting into about to get into a big fight, and he's learned a conflict resolution. He's like, "Put down your fist. Let's have a conversation." And the other guy, who's the taekwondo master, is like, "No." He goes, well, I tried. No,
It's the thought that counts, right?
it's the thought that counts. Well, it's the inner journey that does count. Actually, it is the thought that
Right.
counts, literally, in storytelling. So you want to establish the flaw, and then you want to establish what was I saying? Okay, you want to establish the character flaw, and you want to establish a tone, which you're doing if it's an action film, starting with a fight scene works, and you want to establish a crisis, which is a fight scene is going to include crisis.
Mm-hmm.
When you get into the fight scene, what is the character? Here's what you do: you work, you write a fight scene from the character's perspective, and that's the key. For example, what is the character flaw?
Um, right now I'm working with an arc of him going from being aloof to being compassionate. And so what it is he's it's not going to be fighting against another person, it's going to be fighting against a creature
Mm-hmm.
where he in fighting said creature, he inadvertently saves the person that was going to be the victim, but he didn't do it to save them. He
Right.
did it to fight the creature. He's going to learn to do it to save them, if that makes sense.
Sure, and it also could be, if you're wanting to set up that the character is aloof, maybe there's something about the creature that he doesn't understand, and the other guy goes, I wasn't here for you. I don't even know why this thing and I were fighting or whatever. And he goes, well, you did just kick its egg, and he's like, oh, well,
Right.
You could play with that kind of thing, but you want to deal with the characters' flaws and characters' issues when writing any fight scene. Like if a character is afraid of heights, then you make the scene about the heights, not about the punching and the ducking. It's about looking over that ledge, and you have to understand the character's perspective. What is this character's strong points? If they are aloof, but they are a great fighter or whatever, what is this character? What is okay? So if they're aloof, so what is the skill that comes from being aloof? If
I
someone's
have an answer.
really
I'm
aloof,
just trying to figure
he's
out how to
not
put it.
burdened by. Um, Go ahead.
It's his skill, I guess, is to be able to go into because these fights are a common thing in his life. So it's to be able to go into these fights objectively without having to worry about someone else's safety, without having to worry about someone else's property, without having to worry about the whatever damage he's going to cause. He's able to go in and get the job done and not
Yeah,
burden
it's a lot like
himself with all
Hancock.
these.
It sounds like
Hmm?
the movie Hancock starring Will Smith. Have you seen it?
Oh gosh, it's been a long. I think I saw it when it was new,
Yeah,
so it's been a
he's
while.
a very inconsiderate person, and he's
It's not even inconsiderate. It's more just of a he's there to do the job, and if it helps someone, it did, and if it didn't,
his
then
skill
it
set
didn't. That's
him
not
caring
his
about other
concern.
people is probably that he doesn't need anybody. He's very
Yeah.
self-reliant,
Yes.
and he travels around probably picking up bounties on monsters, serving
Yes.
smaller communities, um, and walks away after he's been paid. And he doesn't
Right.
care about how what that means to the town.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I would
That's why I
incorporate
had him
those things.
rejecting
I would incorporate those things into the opening, and that he will, when he goes to collect the bounty, if they don't have it, he finds a way to take it in ways that they didn't want him to take.
So I guess part of me kind of wonders then how much of like if I go from the fight to going to collect the bounty, is that still considered one scene then, or am I now starting to write two different scenes?
That's two different scenes, so you won't cover you won't cover the fight and the thing. The question is whether you need the fight to start. Is the movie about the fantasy element of it? I mean, the genre is fantasy,
Yeah.
not action, right?
Right.
All right. Well, then you don't need to start with the fight scene anyway. What you need to start
Okay.
with, he's dragging a beast through the town that has been wrecked by the fight
Okay.
before establish his flaw. You don't need to show action. You don't need to get us in that way. Get us. You hook an audience through the heart, not
Mhm.
through the visuals. I mean, you keep the visuals going, but the way you're going to get an audience's attention is to get us into the character's personality.
Okay.
He's dragging this enormous creature back through the town square to the sheriff or the townspeople or the mayor or whatever kind of situation or city or dwelling or village that he's serving. And he wants his payment and he doesn't care and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, you're doing, he's probably one of those guys who's like, yeah, you're doing a lot of talking, but what I'm needing is a lot of paycheck. So
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't. That's not my problem. They go, you wrecked our town. He goes, well, it's one of those moments like in Ghostbusters when he goes, that's fine. I can go over here and wake him up, and he starts slapping the creature in the face to wake him up. Hey, buddy, you're free to go. And they're all like, no, no, no. He goes, oh, so we were saying,
Right. Okay.
So I think you will get the reader's interest far better by really giving us a great, flawed, interesting, if there's a sense of humor to be had, great. If he's cold, then you have another character, and maybe whoever the person is who he saved, you find out that that's the mayor's son or daughter or whatever, and then starts tagging along, and he doesn't want him. He goes, "I owe you a life debt," and he goes, "I don't need your life debt. I don't like. I need two mouths to feed."
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's, it's so it sounds like you have the good start of a character. So I guess my answer was you probably don't need the action to write it in the first scene. I would skip
Yeah.
that and go straight to the confrontation that illustrates personality, um, and then and that's your whole scene. But when it comes to action, think about how characters fight and think about what's behind fighting. I don't talk about, right hook, left hook, jab punch, flying roundhouse kick, super block. I talk about momentum. I talk about a little bit like fighting style. Um, to give us a sense, I base the fight in character again, in character discovery, in who the character is and what makes that character especially unique.
Mm-hmm.
Different people fight in different ways. One guy is a brawler, always using his weight and throwing it around to get, because he's a big guy, using that to crush his opponents, while another guy is fast and agile and able to avoid most of the blows until the guy lands one headbutts, makes him so dizzy, then all he does is take a beating because he can't get his own breath.
Right.
That's the kind of way to describe an action scene. You know, so
Okay.
diving between his legs and dodging every swing of a punch until one surprise headbutt catches him in the nose. He drops to his knees. Then the Goliath pounds his face with his fist. Pounds him into submission or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Pounds him into unconsciousness. Just and so make it about character type, and character uniqueness, and character personality, and make it more about who's fighting than what they're doing while they're fighting.
Okay. Yeah,
Now,
that
of
makes sense.
course, you might want to think about, you may, but you will want to set it in specific places so that so that it gives you a sense of stakes. Like if they're on
Mm-hmm.
top of, they're fighting on the Eiffel Tower, that's something. That adds a certain level of stakes. If they're all the way up on the Eiffel Tower fighting over a bomb set to blow up Paris, that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you'll include the information that sets the scene.
Right.
Okay. Any other questions? Does anybody have any other questions? Now's your chance. You got me. I'm right here.
Well, that was my big one. So
Well, that was
I,
I
I,
have a
I made
question.
my contribution.
Mr. Bone. How are you today?
I'm doing great, sir. How are you?
I'm wonderful.
I
I'm
have
wonderful.
I have a
Actually, I'm
question on
terrible,
formatting.
but I'm happy to be with you guys.
Yeah. I have a question on formatting.
Uh-huh.
I have a character in my script that is a doll, is an animated doll,
Okay.
that cannot speak, but tries to communicate through nonverbal methods like certain poses and things like oh really, or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
How would I write that? How would I identify that in the action lines? Like if they strike a specific pose that would make me say, I love you or something like that, or something along those
You would have to write out what they're doing. So the dog puts its hands over its heart and blows her a kiss.
lines. Okay, so it's just like that. All right, so you can't actually I mean, I was putting
You
like
cannot make
parentheticals.
conclusions for
Okay.
the reader as to what the person is trying to say. This is very important. So it's really important you all learn this, because this is one of the biggest lessons of screenwriting, and that is that you don't write conclusions in the action lines for actors or the audience, because you're not going to be there to explain what it means. What you have to put in the script is the action that an actor can do to convey what it is you want, what you want said, what you want communicated to the reader. And if the action doesn't do it, doesn't communicate that, then you can't sit there and explain it to them because you won't be there to explain it to them in the movie theater.
Great. Okay. And then one more real quick.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the beats and like so your turning points and things,
Sure.
what's in a 10-page script, what's an acceptable amount of fudge room, like say for the exact 2 minutes and a half mark? If something came in at like 3 minutes, is that too far off?
No,
Or page
probably not. I mean, as long as you're keeping the page length to where it needs to be, there's always a little bit of fudge room. I mean,
Okay.
basically, you don't want to be hitting turning point two, which is the choice to go on this adventure and
Right.
take an action to do something. You don't want that happening on page 3.5. That needs to be happening at the latest at the top of page 3, bottom
Okay,
of
great.
page 2.
That's
And then,
about what I was at.
yeah, because if it's a 5-page script, you want, a 10-page script, you want 5 pages of Act 2.
Okay. And then would any of those, would it ever be a situation where any of those things would happen in the same scene? Like, would you ever go from what would be traditionally, I guess, in Act 1 into Act 2 in the same scene on a 10-page script?
Yeah, but it shouldn't be consecutive beats. You
Right.
can't go from turning point 2 directly to turning point 3 in half a page.
Right. I'm more interested in the inciting incident to the decision to go or
On the
whatever it is,
adventure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine, but it just makes sure it doesn't feel like you're not giving us the moment of that moment of refusal.
Refusal. Yeah.
On the inciting incident, something happens, and the protagonist is like, "Oh crap! I've learned. Holy Moses! I really need to do something here, and do something out of my character to do, which is going to help start the character arc, get it really kicking. And there needs to be a moment of, oh no, I'm going to run. I'm not going to do this. This is stupid. Even Luke Skywalker says, but I got chores to do. And then he's going to go home and not go with Obi-Wan to save the princess or deliver the plans to the rebel base. He's going to take off,
Right.
but he happens to get home and his aunt and his uncle are dead, and he's got nowhere to go. And he makes a decision. He could stay there, which is where he never wanted to be, or he can go on this adventure. And he decides to go with Obi-Wan.
Sounds good.
So, you got to have a moment of, because the audience doesn't understand that this is a big choice for the character if you don't make it look like a big choice for the character to do it. And that's the key. If the person is just going to do it and then go straight to it and do it and not think about it, and not realize that this is against character, then the audience doesn't understand that this is a big decision they're making. And what audiences want are characters who make big life decisions, because that's interesting to us, to watch somebody go against their nature and realize they need to do something that is out of character and then take that action. That's interesting for us to watch, because we all dream of doing things differently. We all dream of trying to, we all, there's always something in life we wish we could go back and make some tougher decisions earlier. For me, it's, not, I have my own things. We don't need to get personal here. It's a classroom. Okay. So, but we all have our things we wish we'd done, and you have to, and then, we're giving the audience a chance to vicariously live through the decision process to change our lives. And some of us have made those bold decisions, and I've done it too, and that's great. So, that's what an audience is going to really empathize with. So make sure you make it difficult for the protagonist to do that between the inciting incident and the decision to go forward on the outer journey.
Great. Thank you.
You bet. Any other questions? Okay. So, like I said before, let's talk just a tiny bit about the assignments. in the first in character creation and development, we have designed a protagonist, an antagonist, and the supporting characters. I am going to be getting you the feedback on those as soon as I can. I am working on them now. Um, but you know who your character is and what you're saying with it and what their flaw is. So you're going to write a scene that that gives them a sizzling introduction. Remember in week 2 when I talked about the character introduction, when you write a scene, a character introduction in a scene, when you wrote the character dossier for your protagonist and antagonist, go back and look at that and look at my notes that I gave you on that, and make sure that you fix the things that I gave you notes on in that, and give us the whole scene in which that introduction takes place, and let us see who this character is, what their flaw is, what crisis, because we see a flaw in the moment of the crisis. So that's why we put characters in a crisis. Usually, the crisis is very fitting to the genre. So if you're writing a supernatural thing, it could be, the crisis could be, some new guy rises from the dead, or something like that. Or the first zombie in the beginning of the zombie apocalypse happens. And it's the person you love, whatever. So you hit genre. You give them a crisis. A crisis is what usually triggers a person to really show the most drastic state of their character flaw, and show how they deal with having that character flaw and how they overcome it in a normal everyday crisis, at least what is everyday for them. Uh, that way, we know what they're like before we give them a situation, and you should be able to do that in within the first page. I mean, I've seen somebody establish it in half a page, and then it's the first scene. You actually you do it in half a page, and then at the bottom of page 1, top of page 2, you have that moment when, you know what, that thing, it's going to come back and bite you, and they realize there's a shocking thing that happens, but you're not getting into that. You're just worrying about the first scene, and give us a great protagonist moment. Make sure you give them an entrance that is the kind of entrance a star actor wants to act and play. You got to think about this. Every time you introduce a character, that you're writing something for an actor to play, and you want to write an entrance that an actor wants to do. That's how you get great actors, and it's going to be the first scene they read with that character. So you're going to be like, either you give them an entrance that makes them go, "Ooh, I want to play that," or they're going to look at it and go, "Eh, you know what? I'll wait for my next Law and Order bit part," because they're going to pay a fortune. You know what I mean? So that's that scene, and it's only one scene, and do not make it more than 3 pages. All right, keep it simple, clear. Identify things. Screenwriting is very different from novelization or other written types of storytelling. A screenplay, a script, things move pretty fast. There's incredible economy in moving story forward in a script. So you don't want scenes to take. Most scenes are about 2 pages in movie scripts. The longest most are, except for when you're in like a big climax, is 4 pages. That's, but an average scene length in a movie script, a lot of time can be half a page. It's just you're setting things up, you're moving things along. There's action and conflict. And then the dialogue scenes and the interactions, they can get a little longer, obviously, more 2 to 4 pages, but never more than 4, because that'd be really dragging unless you're in the middle of a climax, and that makes sense. But then you're moving around locations all the time, so it is different scenes. All right, that's that assignment. Does anybody have questions about that assignment for character creation and development?
I do actually have a quick question, and
Right.
pardon my ignorance on this one, but
No.
like you said, it's the first time we've done anything in a script form. So I just want to make sure for formatting, do I first write like my description of the setting, and then I'm going to put in that character introduction, the revised version of what I did a couple weeks ago?
No. the first thing you put in is a slug line, which is interior or exterior, EXT or INT period, whether it takes place
Right.
inside or outside. Then the location, which is a micro and a macro location, which is like, for example, you could say the the car household or the car's home, and then a comma or a hyphen and a space on either side of any hyphen you use in a slug line,
Mhm.
and then bedroom or living room or kitchen or whatever room it's in, and then another hyphen. I prefer the comma before, but you can use a hyphen, and then you always use the hyphen before either day or night. That's first, and then after that, then it's an action introduction. Now, what an action line or two, and the way I like to do it is if you just sit there and describe a setting, you're not going to hook your readers right away. So I like to grab the audience, try to find a way to integrate action into establishing the location in any scene. For example, uh, um, a dark, long shadow stretches from the window over the bed, over the king size bed, in which a body lays dormant under the covers. The window creaks open. So you're establishing that you're in a master bedroom. You're establishing there's
Mhm.
a bed. You're establishing there's somebody. You're setting the scene, but you're doing it while you're creating conflict and showing things happening. So
Okay.
I establish with action. Don't do it separately. And then, of course,
Okay.
once you set the scene, you can introduce character. I find that I usually like to start with something uh, before I get into the character, before I introduce the character, like set a scene and then introduce it. Because if you just start, your first line starts with this character, this age, da 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 da. Basically, what you're telling the audience is the movie starts with a close up like this, and that you see nothing else. you know,
I like them.
and it's not giving the director a lot of room to be creative. If you're telling them basically you're seeing a man, you know,
Mhm.
give him a place, and then let him decide where to put the camera and how to cover it. Does that
Okay.
help?
I think so. I think I mean, even after I revised it a couple times, I think it's still going to be pretty rough. So, but I think
Writing's
it'll help.
rewriting. All right, cool. Does anybody else have any, or you have any other questions about the scene for character creation and development? Okay, then we're going to move on to the other class, which is writing for film and animation. And the homework assignment this week is you're turning in your 3-act, fully executed short screenplay, which is not an episode, which means you're not marking Act 1, Act 2, or Act 3 or anything like that in it. You don't put those things in a movie script. Um, it's the max 10 pages. Some scripts come in as short as 4 or 5 pages, and it's been done. I wrote a short film and mine was 4.5 pages, um, so it's possible to do a 3-act story in that time. Uh, and that's it. You know all the rules. Make sure that last week you wrote a first draft of the script. It didn't have to be great. I don't like to grade a first draft of anything because nobody should be graded on the first draft of a whole script. Because I always rewrite things 100 times before I let anybody look at it. So, but you got some feedback from each other. Take the notes that you feel really work and that really help you, and the others keep in mind as to asking yourself why they might have thought that, and if it was just them telling a different kind of story than what you wanted to tell, then just chalk it up to different writers have different ideas of ways they'd show and do things. But make sure you change all the incorrect things of formatting and English errors and things like that. Be sure to apply the cheat sheet in the editing lesson. It's 35 pages of every editing trick I use and have come up with since the beginning of my screenwriting days, and everything I've learned from all my schools and everything. It is also the foundation of my next book. So it's kind of like a sneak peek at that, because my first book comes out this week, or this next month, and then I got to start on the other one. At least I want to. So go through each of the tricks, look at the different ways to spot errors, and just go through that cheat sheet one thing at a time, and make sure the whole script is clear of that error. Don't use passive verbs and action lines, please. Don't use is, are, verbs ending in ing. No, all active tense verbs. All action needs to be written in present tense. You need to tell us what things are happening as we're watching it, not what happened. Um, Make sure none of your dialogue is on the nose. Make sure there's some subtext there, and that you're not saying things directly. You're saying something that will allow the audience to understand what you're saying, but you don't have to give word for word. Like, you don't ever say exactly what a character wants. The character wants something, but for example, in a romantic comedy, if a guy wants a kiss, he's not going to say, uh, "I want to kiss you." A good writer will say something about her lips, when automatically the audience is going to know, and their head is going to conclude that this character is considering kissing somebody, or going for a meal of some kind. I don't know, but but you get the idea. So go through the seven deadly dialogue sins. They are explained in detail in the Screenwriter's Bible by David Trottier, your textbook for the class on structure or formatting, and make sure you apply those, because not great dialogue is one of the biggest things that separates uh, novice writers from really experienced screenwriters, is avoiding those seven deadly sins. There's that, the active dialogue, the constant conflict, and then fantastic scene transitions are a top thing too, so that when somebody cuts from one scene to another scene, it does something to the audience. Like, look, I promise I'm going to be super careful. Cut to, he's running through traps, diving over this, give that juxtaposition, give that moment. He goes, I'm not going to tell her a word. Cut to, he's like, so I'm standing there and she said this about you. You make sure, so that when you cut, it feels right. It's like, boom, it just drags you right in based on the last moment. That last moment of the previous scene and the first moment of the next scene, they should come together in some way. And it doesn't have to be opposing each other. It can be in symmetry. It could be this character. If it's a werewolf movie, you don't sit there and watch a moonrise or a sunrise in a movie. It's cliche. But if it's a werewolf movie and we know the full moon has some impact, you can cut to somebody, looking up at the full moon as it rises, and then you're cutting to the other guy under that moonlight, changing into a werewolf. That's seamless, because you have a visual branch going from one thing to the next thing. And that's one of the great tricks of screenwriting, is really making these transitions from scene to scene feel natural and engaging, that draw in a way that draw people in. Does anybody have any questions about the assignment for the complete 3-act single story screenplay that is 10 pages or less? Any questions about that? Okay, then. Well, then I guess that we're done here. Is there, before we end, one last chance? Anybody have any other questions? Okay. Well, then thank you for coming. I appreciate you showing up, all four of you, and I hope you have a great and wonderful time doing these assignments, because you're supposed to love this stuff. Otherwise, why are you studying it?